Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday to you. Josh is Severe Weather. I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. Those of you that are regular subscribers and people who follow, apologize for being off for a few days. Not much weather to talk about. It's just been very busy over here, but we are going to take a look at some potential tropical development next week in the Caribbean. Things have been relatively quiet here in this final month of the tropical season, but that could change. I'm also going to talk about some very welcome and very heavy rainfall for some of us in the South that really do need the rain after a very dry summer and first part of fall. So we're going to get a look at that as well as what's to come here for the upcoming weekend. Possibility here for some late season development, maybe a depression or a storm. The next name on the list is Vince. This is the area that I had kept an eye on here about a week and a half ago with a wave that came across the Eastern Caribbean into the Western Caribbean that never really got going. The difference here is that this system is going to be kind of homegrown. It's going to form in the Western Caribbean where wind shear is lighter than, say, the Central or Eastern Caribbean. So, in my opinion, it's probably got a better chance of developing. But right now, there are still quite a few major differences in the models. All of them show lowering pressures. And the area in red that I've got highlighted is the Southwest Caribbean, the coast of Nicaragua, Jamaica, Southeast Cuba, Western Haiti as the area more than likely to see at least some heavy rainfall out of this, if not some gusty winds. The area in yellow, we've got to watch for potentially a future track here later next week and next weekend. We'll keep an eye on it in Bermuda as well. For the time being, I don't think it's going to be a threat to Florida or the northwestern Bahamas. There are a couple of models that have kind of gone back and forth on that, but typically this time of the year, that is not an area that gets hit. The reason why are that cold fronts drop southward. They protect Gulf Coast and southeastern United States from anything coming up. But obviously, if you are in South Florida, the Florida Keys, Northwest Cuba, the Bahamas, just keep an eye on it right now. Things could still change. So here is our outlook from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, now showing no chance this develops over the weekend, but a 20% chance that it becomes something, a depression or a storm by the middle of next week, say this time on Friday. We're looking at a broad area of low pressure, some gradual development, so it's not going to spin up very quickly and likely going to be meandering slowly here in the southwestern Caribbean Sea. So obviously in Jamaica, you've got a lot of rain coming your way. Here's a look at the world here from Zoom Earth, and you can see it's pretty quiet. If you look in closer, you can see here's the broad area we're watching, kind of north of Panama and east of Costa Rica. Right now, nothing organized. In the Pacific, nothing threatening Mexico. We do have some thunderstorm activity over the monsoon trough. In the Western Pacific, things are a little bit busier. We're watching an area south of Guam. It's not developing now, but something we do need to keep an eye on in the Philippine Sea next week if you do plan on any international travel, or those of you who may be watching from Asia. But outside of that, we're in a pretty quiet pattern for the time being. Here's a look at the Pacific, and I'm going to get my pen out and just kind of circle some major features for you guys here. This is the area we're going to watch for gradual development here. Just a bit of a trough right now over the far southwestern Caribbean. Nothing organized at this point. There's also an area I'll keep an eye on for you guys in the Pacific, but it is likely heading to the west and not threatening land. Much of the Atlantic, though, is quiet. So really, it's the Caribbean that's going to be the area to watch. We do have a front that is moving across the southeastern United States, and that's going to get hung up with this trough moving in from the south and west, producing some significant moisture for the first time in a while here over parts of the deep south into the Ohio River Valley. It's going to be an unsettled weekend here for those of us in the Carolinas into the Gulf states here. So we do need some rain, of course, across much of this area, but it unfortunately is coming over the weekend. Aside from that, the rest of the Atlantic is actually very quiet, a massive area of dry air in place here, as we do have high pressure aloft centered east of Florida. That's produced the very warm weather that we've seen over the last several days across this area, even up into the mid-Atlantic states. But that is coming to an end, and we are not going to see any kind of significant warming anytime soon due to the fact that this big trough here is pushing farther into the east. Here's a look at the water vapor imagery. You can see that big area of sinking air in place here over the western and southwestern Atlantic. And then you can see all this moisture streaming up, mid and upper level moisture moving across the central and eastern United States. And that is what's going to be responsible for our wet pattern that sets up here in the Gulf states over the next 10 days or so. You can see nothing super organized, no major features, just some thunderstorm development here near Central America, but that could change. As we zoom in a little closer, you can see there's a very significant lack of organization right now. Everything's going to be very broad, meaning that once something does form, the broader it is, the longer it's going to take to consolidate and become a named system. Models are starting to show that happening here, maybe next Thursday or Friday. But until it does get closer to that time frame right now, this is just very nebulous. It's very uncertain as to what exactly is going to happen. Here's a look at the water vapor image, and you can see right now, and I apologize, I know my cursor's small and I'm using Zoom and it just doesn't give me the option to do what I really want to. So I'm looking at other solutions. But anyway, for those of you watching from home, I'm going to circle things. Just a trough at this point, nothing organized. But if something consolidates, it's probably going to be down in this area here. And it looks like that's going to take a few more days to happen. In the meantime, we've got just this huge area of darkness that shows very dry air in place. That is keeping things very quiet. If you are traveling into the Bahamas for a cruise, or Cuba, or the Yucatan Peninsula, things are going to look pretty good here through this weekend into early next week. Afterwards, though, as this trough here that is bringing all this moisture up into the Gulf states gradually shifts east, what it's going to do is it's going to induce this moisture to move back across the Caribbean and then northeastward and bring a much wetter pattern into this portion of the world. So it's been a pretty wet November. We've had a bit of a break here for the time being, but it's going to get wet once again in this area. Here's a look at the European ensemble. Probability of something becoming a depression still pretty low here through Monday and Tuesday. Then when we get to Wednesday, a better chance of something forming. I don't think it'll be close to Colombia or Panama. I think it's more likely up in here. As we get later into the week, you can see the chance for a tropical depression as we get to Thursday, and Thursday night is going to be high here, 80 to 90% over the southwestern Caribbean. This is next Friday and then next Saturday, and you can see we start to see a better chance moving up through the central Caribbean and into the southern and eastern Bahamas, and then eventually the southwestern Atlantic by next Sunday. So there is a pretty good amount of support for something to form here. And you can see with our spaghetti plots, if it does form, less likely it affects the Northwest Caribbean, Florida, and the Southeast Gulf. More likely it moves into the Central Caribbean, including Jamaica, including Haiti and Dominican Republic, including Eastern Cuba, including the Central and Eastern Bahamas, maybe Turks and Caicos, and further down the road, possibly something to watch in Bermuda here as we get to about next Sunday, the 19th, or next Monday, the 20th. That's what we're watching. The GFS ensemble solutions, you can see here, nothing through next Tuesday. And then as we get to next Wednesday, we do see some lowering of pressure with the strongest solution showing something south of Jamaica next Wednesday, the 15th. Several ensemble solutions then take things, generally speaking, to the northeast across Jamaica, Cuba, and the Bahamas. And there are some deeper solutions here, but generally speaking, everything moving away to the northeast. There are one or two solutions that keep something lingering closer to Cuba or even closer to Florida, but these are outliers. They're not ones that I use to forecast at this time. And again, they're weaker solutions. The stronger solutions go, generally speaking, off to the northeast, which you would expect this time of the year based on the stronger westerly winds that we typically get. The operational GFS from this morning, and now that the time has changed, I can actually show it to you this time of day, shows lowering pressure here east of Nicaragua, southwest of Jamaica here next Wednesday evening. At this point, probably a tropical depression, but then potentially a tropical storm by the 16th, which is next Thursday, moving through Jamaica and then moving through Cuba. Again, this is a tropical storm, not a hurricane at this point, but Friday the 17th, and then maybe deepening, perhaps close to hurricane strength as it moves away from the Bahamas next weekend around the 18th, continuing near and just to the east of Bermuda here. This is Bermuda. I'm sorry, my cursor's small. Actually, I'll draw for you guys here. Just be patient with me. But this is Bermuda right here, and you can see the storm is moving in this direction, not far from Bermuda here over the weekend. So another wet weekend in Bermuda potentially for the 18th and 19th, according to this run of the GFS. The GFS has been the most persistent on showing this kind of a track. There have been some detail adjustments that have been made. If you look back one model run, you can see a much deeper solution, which I don't necessarily buy at this point, showing just a hurricane lingering near Cuba and the Bahamas, and then just circling around, even going into the Eastern Gulf on the 26th. This is extremely unlikely to happen. If you go back a model run, you can see that same general idea. Now, this one has it looping north of Puerto Rico as a hurricane. Again, I don't think it's going to get nearly this strong. I think we're probably looking at a solution more likely that's going to mirror what we saw here on the 6C of the GFS, and that is maybe a deepening system. Maybe it approaches hurricane strength, but likely it's accelerating northeast, and then high pressure builds in before Thanksgiving here over the southeast. The European model only goes out 10 days, so it's not going to show that solution, but it does show gradually lowering pressures over the weekend with something near Jamaica here on the 18th, and then maybe tracking in this general direction northeast of Hispaniola between Bermuda and Puerto Rico. But it is not showing that strong a solution. The Canadian model is kind of in between. Gee, we've never seen this happen, right? But you can see here on the Canadian model, again, nothing until about the 16th or 17th forming. So this is still about a week from now. And then we see some lowering pressure near Jamaica. And then this is Saturday into Sunday, tracking through southeastern Cuba as either a depression or a low-end tropical storm, and then continuing to pull away to the northeast and getting absorbed by this front. So the Canadian solution looks very possible to me. The GFS looks possible as well. And the European could be right in that nothing even develops here. And then the icon, this is a German mesoscale model, shows lowering pressure east of Nicaragua and Honduras next Thursday. And then generally speaking, tracking northeast towards Jamaica on Friday. This will probably continue and track north of Hispaniola over the weekend. You can see, though, regardless of what forms, we're going to have a lot of rainfall here in the next 10 days. Possibility of 5 inches or more above average. And typically it's a wet time of year down in here, with water still being very warm, with wind shear being low, and with fronts dropping south. We get remnant fronts that bring a lot of rainfall into this area. So very, very wet pattern setting up across Central America, across Jamaica, Southeast Cuba, and Hispaniola. And this could lead to significant flooding no matter what. If you take this out to 15 days, you can see those anomalies continue to climb. Another area to watch here, not for tropical trouble, but for rain, is going to be the Gulf Coast. And for those of you here in the Gulf Coast, you don't want a miserable week leading up to travel here for Thanksgiving, but you do want to see some rain. And I think we're definitely looking at that. The east coast of Florida could be wet as well. Really, it's the Yucatan and the Gulf that look to be fairly dry, kind of in between all of these systems as we have high pressure dominating. But the western and central Gulf, Louisiana, where we definitely need rain, it is looking more favorable. If you look at the GFS, we see the same thing. A lot of rain expected here from South Texas up into western Florida. Not so much across the Florida Peninsula until you get down to the east coast of Florida. The Northwest Caribbean doesn't look super wet at this point, neither does Mexico, but near the central coast of Central America, straight on through Jamaica, Hispaniola, Cuba, into the Bahamas, and up towards Bermuda, we're likely going to see much above average precipitation, regardless of whether or not we see low pressure forming. So we're going to take a closer look at that in the coming days. Across the Western Pacific, we are watching a spin up here, and actually multiple spin ups. Nothing officially developed at this point, but we're watching this area of invest as it may be heading towards the Philippines here next week. This is Guam right here. Palau is over here, I believe Palau. And then you can see this is going to move slowly westward towards the Philippines, which, believe it or not, in November often do see typhoons and tropical systems. We don't really see that tailing off until we get more into December, but in November, things are still busy. So we're going to watch this area here. You can see there's another area that is trying to get going behind it. So kind of two potentially named systems here to watch here in the next 2 weeks. If you do happen to be traveling overseas, you need to keep an eye on things here. This is Invest 95W. It's going to take some time to develop. Probably not going to go over Guam, but something we have to watch in the Philippine Sea next week. There are solutions that show it moving towards the central Philippines as a stronger system, and possibly maybe even closer to Luzon and turning away towards Okinawa. But again, we've got about 10 days before potentially that happens. The GFS model says nothing really forms until next week. And then we actually have the system behind it that we have to watch coming towards Guam on Wednesday and Thursday of next week. And that's the one to watch in the Philippines. And oh, by the way, there may be something behind it. This is next weekend. So potentially not just one, but 2 typhoons to keep an eye on here. And this will likely change until these systems do form. But in the Philippines, we're watching the future of this invest. And we're going to have to watch in Guam and the Mariana Islands, the next one behind it. No threat to Japan or China, no threat to Korea at this point. But the Philippines and certainly the Mariana Islands and on to the north and east, we do have to watch things. Going to be pretty wet in this area as well. You can see much above average precipitation as we get into an active phase of the Madden-Julian oscillation that favors action in the Western Pacific. So we are going to be in for a very wet pattern here over the coming days. Not so much over Japan, Korea, or China, but over the southwestern Pacific here, as well as turning away over the Mariana Islands into the northwest. And if we do see a recurving typhoon, that could lead to some bigger changes down the road here in December in the United States. Most of you probably don't care about the Pacific, but do keep an eye on if a typhoon forms and recurves, because what that's going to do is it's going to make the jet stream more frisky here. It's going to lead to more undulations and more active weather after Thanksgiving, heading into the holiday season here next month across the United States. Speaking of the U.S., I do want to show you what's coming up the pipe here. Not a lot of weather for most of us in the country. We're going to see active weather, though, forming here on the Gulf states here as we get into early next week. Pretty quiet across the central and eastern United States. And then we see active weather hitting the Pac Northwest, and that will move across Canada. We'll see some significant snow over parts of Canada. But overall, this is not a super busy pattern. As we get later into next week, though, we could see moisture moving into the southwestern United States. And we're going to have to keep an eye on what happens from that as we get after the 20th or so. As we take a look at rainfall, this is the national blend of models. You can see where our front is kind of hung up right now, but then things start getting busier in deep South Texas over the weekend. And eventually that moisture does build northward and eastward. So significant rain may be coming for the coastal bend in Houston over the weekend and early next week. And then next week, we see significant rain spreading eastward here across much of the deep South. So a wet week is expected here in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and western Florida. Not so much in southwest Florida, but maybe on the East Coast, we see an enhancement of rain. The Carolinas are going to get wetter as well. I don't think we're going to see as much rain as we need to see, but we're heading in that direction. And then on the West Coast, we're very wet in the Pac Northwest this weekend and especially next week, and then turning wetter in California and the Southwest later next week into next weekend. And this rain is very much needed. The Northwest needs to see it right now, but especially Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, we're in an exceptional drought here. So we are going to see a lot of relief coming. It's not going to be enough to end the drought, but it is certainly going to help as we get on into next week. And that'll be the case into the Tennessee Valley and Carolinas as well. Again, some help, but not probably enough to put an end to the drought. Here's a look at the national blend of models. And you can see through next weekend, we are looking at potentially 4 to 6 inches of rain. And locally, higher amounts are certainly possible. Now, when you get farther north, into the North Texas, we're not going to see a lot of significant rain. This is primarily going to be the I-10 corridor and then up to the I-20 corridor, but we'll take what we can get. Looking at the southeast as well, not a lot of rain from this system, but the moisture coming out of the Gulf next week is going to juice us up and bring amounts, generally speaking, of 1 to 3 inches across the Tennessee Valley, across the western Carolinas, across Georgia, and maybe on the east coast of Florida as well, and 4 to 6 inches over the central Gulf Coast states here, right on into next week. Not going to be super wet in the Northeast. It will be turning cooler here over the weekend in the Northeast as well as in Southwest Texas, but warming right back up next week. You can see an expanse of much milder than average temperatures next week. So we rebound very quickly into next weekend. And then as we get towards Thanksgiving, I think we're going to stay warm in the east, but turning colder in the west. So maybe right after Thanksgiving, we finally see some cooler weather eventually making its way eastward, first into the Great Lakes and Northeast, then eventually into the Southeast after that. But overall, November is going to be a pretty mild month with respect to average. We are going to see some detail changes in that. We've got a front moving through the Carolinas, and the details is going to be in who gets all the rain here in the Carolinas, but it could be a pretty nasty weekend for some of us. You can see temperatures here tomorrow may only be in the 50s in parts of Georgia and South Carolina versus what we've been. That's the 70s and 80s. The Northeast will be chilly as well, 40s and 50s with 30s across New England. Chilly but seasonable in the Great Lakes. As we head into Sunday, though, we may not get out of the 40s here in the western and central Piedmont of the Carolinas. Maybe only 48 in Charlotte, 49 or 50 in Raleigh if it is raining on Sunday. It's not going to be a lot of rain, but it's going to be kind of cool and dank. So not a very pleasant day. We were in the 80s for several days this week, and now we're talking 40s later in the weekend. But that's only going to last up until about Monday, and then temperatures rebound Tuesday into Wednesday. And you can see here, well, let me move that back. Next Thursday, we're back into the 70s in eastern North Carolina, into the 60s around Philly, and seasonably 50s and 40s in the Appalachians. Even Florida is going to be a little bit cooler as well, but still pretty warm. Speaking of the Appalachians, as we see this light rain moving across here, We are going to see some elevational snow today over parts of West Virginia and Western Maryland, maybe even around Hot Springs, Virginia. Just some light rain moving through now. Then we get a break. And then tomorrow, we are going to see some light rain beginning to expand into eastern and central parts of the Carolinas. It may not get it all the way to Raleigh, but it's going to be pretty close according to the NAM. But looking a little bit closer today, you can see rain's going to pick up this morning with heavier snow east of Elkins into West Virginia. And right along the ridge tops, we are going to look at snow mostly during the day today, ending by this evening. And then pretty quiet weather Saturday into Sunday across this area. Here's a look at possible snow totals. Not all of this is going to accumulate, but you can see up to 5 inches falling in the ski areas here of West Virginia. Most of that during the day today. We could even see a little bit here east of Luray and east of the Shenandoah Valley here on the ridge tops. Probably not going to be much, but that's going to take down the rest of our foliage here in the Virginias. This will help, though. We need moisture here. It's actually been very dry. We've had some wildfires. So this is going to help out, even if it is snow, but certainly just a sign of winter and things to come here. So thank you all so much for your time today. If you did enjoy my video, please consider becoming a subscriber. I do have a membership option if you feel led to donate some money. I am going to be building that up as well. But I thank you all for your time today. And as always, I thank God. He is the great creator. He's the reason that I'm here. He's called me to do this through his son, Jesus Christ. And Romans 8:28 says that, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. The reason I mention God at the end of my videos is, for 30 years of my life, I was not a believer. I did not believe in the Christian lifestyle, but that door opened for me. Honestly, I put all of my worth in how much money I made, my college degree, the people I associated with. And at times I didn't feel very worthy. I felt pretty worthless when things went bad for me. I lost my job when I was about 29, got laid off, and was in a financially bad spot, as you can imagine. But instead of putting my worth in how much money I was making, I started to see that there were some blessings here. Actually, doors opened up for me later that allowed me to become a Christian person. And that's that I was finally beginning to love God the way he loved me. He didn't show me that love when I lost my job, but what he was showing me is how to be patient. And I think we all just need to be a little bit more patient and understand that the enemy is going to attack us. This is not God doing things. This is God saying, if you trust in me, then good things are going to come to you later on. I'm going to help you defeat Satan, but it's not going to happen overnight. I think we need to pray more and more because prayers don't get answered right away, but they do get answered. And I know that that is something that has driven me to be successful in this as a YouTuber, which is a tough thing to get into YouTube. It's tough to build an audience, but I will say that I give God all the glory, because if not for this calling to do what I do every day, I don't think I would be truly living out that Christian lifestyle, and that's sharing my faith with you all. So if you have any prayer requests, I would love to pray for you. I believe it's very important. If you could pray for me as well, that'd be wonderful. But I hope you all have a blessed Friday. And if you're not a believer and you're seeing this, look, I'm not judging you at all. This is just my story and my personal belief. You're welcome to whatever belief you have. I am totally an open book when it comes to that. It's just what I've chosen to do and how I've chosen to live my life. And I think it's important to share that with everyone. So I hope you all have a great Friday, and I'm going to try to get you another video here tomorrow morning. Take care and God bless.